Good morning, friends, and welcome back. I'm Mrs. Gordon, and I am so glad you are here with me today to learn new things. We have been talking about weather and climate and temperature and how it's been different types of weather, but there's one important thing left when it comes to our weather and climate: the water cycle. You say, Mrs. Gordon, what is the water cycle? The water cycle is a whole process that our Earth secretly goes through. Sometimes you don't even know it's happening, but this keeps the balance of our weather and climate. So today, you can simply have a construction paper or markers or crayons to draw the cycle with my picture cards that I have today. So get all your materials and let's get started. The water cycle is a process that happens on our Earth to keep our Earth nice and green, and also remember it keeps the balance of our weather and climate. Our water cycle starts with the clouds. Clouds are in the sky, and when they hold in the sky, sometimes they fill with water. And that brings about precipitation. Precipitation is another word for rain. So the first part of our water cycle starts with clouds. And then we have precipitation, also known as rain. Once it rains, and all the rain comes down from the sky to the earth, we have surface water. Basically, that's like a pool of water. They sit in pockets. It can be all over grass, all over a concrete surface. It can be within trees. It can be anywhere. Surface water is water that settles. So first part of our water cycle is clouds, precipitation, which is rain, and then we have the surface water, the water that came from the rain. After the surface water is evaporation. Evaporation, that is a big word. Evaporation simply means disappearing. Our water once the sun comes out, is heated, and that water begins to rise, evaporate back into our sky. The precipitation, the rain that came to our earth and settled down, is now going to rise by heat. So our water cycle starts with clouds, precipitation, also rain, surface water, which is the water from our rain, and then evaporation. Remember, evaporation is where the water is rising by heat to go back into the sky. We have another big word, Evapo Transportation. What does that mean? Transpiration is another term where it's mainly for our plants and leaves. That rises from grass or trees or plants. That's where that moisture, that water is rising back up into our sky. So we have clouds, precipitation, which is rain, our surface water, which is the water that came down and settled onto the earth, evaporation, where from heat it is rising back up into the sky, and then the transpiration, which is from mostly plants and leaves. Then we have sublimation. That's another big word. Sublimation is basically gas rising back up due to dry wind or sky or low air pressure. Again, that's the evaporation process from liquid to gas. It's coming from that state to go back into our sky to create our water cycle again. So again, our water cycle is starting with clouds, precipitation, which is also rain, the surface water, which came from the rain, evaporation, which is the water that is rising back into the sky by heat, transpiration, which is mostly only from plants and leaves, and sublimation, which is the gas that is rising. We also can call this a form of condensation. Condensation is another big word. Have you ever seen tiny droplets from a water bottle that's left out? Or even from frost on a car? Once those disappear, that moisture, that water, goes back into the sky. After this happens, we have groundwater. Groundwater is rivers or oceans or lakes. All that water is being recycled. This is the water you might drink. We have special filters that filtrates our water that is safe for us to drink. That water comes all from the water cycle. So groundwater, from our rivers, our lakes, or oceans. And then our last part of our water cycle is the runoff. Runoff basically means all the water is traveling through the different parts of the earth, even maybe the center of the earth. This also can affect weather. Sometimes rocks can shift. Water can sometimes affect where it causes earthquakes. So our runoff is the different pathways. That's the way you can think of it, that the water goes. Our water cycle is a big process, and this continues to happen. That's what a cycle is. A cycle is, it continues and it never ends. It keeps going and going. So the first step of our water cycle is clouds. And then you have precipitation. Remember, that also means rain. Once it rains, you have the surface water. Surface water, you can think of it like a puddle of water. And then after the surface water, you have evaporation. Think of that puddle as it's sitting there. Eventually, the sun will come out. Heat will be over it. Heat is the temperature. And then the water will begin to rise back into the sky. That's what evaporation is. And then we have transpiration. Remember, this process is only mostly from plants and leaves. The moisture from plants or the stem or the leaves, this causes transpiration. Then we have sublimation. This is the gas part, condensation of our water cycle process. Those tiny droplets of water are disappearing and rising back up into the sky. And then we have our groundwater, which is the oceans, rivers, lakes, and remember, this might be the water that you drink. We have special filters that help keep our water clean and safe for us to drink. Then we have the runoff, where the water chooses to go in different paths to help our earth. The water cycle helps keep the balance of our weather and climate. You did such great work today learning the water cycle with me. The water cycle can be a lot to think about. So next time you're outside, think about what's happening in the sky. If you see a puddle of water, See if it's going to evaporate soon. The plants out there, if they're going to transpire something. Just see if it's happening around you. Remember, sometimes we don't know the water cycle. Grab your nearest adult, tell them as much as you can about it. And until next time, I wish you well.